This video is brought to you by our friends at Lucy. Lucy was founded by Caltech scientists on a mission to reduce tobacco-related harm with a tobacco alternative that doesn't suck. As former smokers dissatisfied with traditional nicotine options, they knew there had to be a better way for adult tobacco users. Guys, it was a big challenge, but they did it with their innovative nicotine gum. With 4 milligrams of nicotine in each piece, you can get a dose anywhere, anytime. I encourage my friends who smoke to choose Lucy gum over cigarettes or vapes for all the obvious reasons. As you know, nicotine is addictive, so use discretion. Lucy gum comes in 3 delicious flavors: wintergreen, cinnamon, and pomegranate. Visit lucy.co and use the promo code Chael20 to save 20% off your entire order. That's lucy.co, or click on the link in the description. Remember, nicotine is addictive, so use discretion. Okay, Dillashaw, Sandhagen. Look, where do you want to sit on this, guys? You can either be of the school of mind that TJ spent some time in the principal's office and therefore you want to hold him back, or you can look at he served his time and now he gets a fresh start. I'm not going to guide you, right? I sat in that same principal's office, so do I come to you biased? I don't think so. I don't think that I do that. I think if a guy gets a new start, he gets a new start. And I only say that because what a war. I mean, this was an epic battle. This is what careers are made of, is matches like this. And there's no way to tell this story without being critical of Sandhagen, which is the last thing I intend to do, truly. But to look at that fight and watch where Sandhagen gave rounds away. And there's a piece of the psychology that will happen to you if you ever end up in battles like that. In any game that you guys played, you'll know this is true to some extent. You will have been through it, where you decide, I've done enough in this round. Now I just have to run out the clock. Even if things go his way, even if I don't offer the same resistance as I generally would, I've done enough. And it was a bad calculation. It wasn't true. TJ was doing the exact opposite math, which is I haven't done enough in this round, but there's still time left. I've got to go out, I got to get him down, and I got to control position. Daniel Cormier had made a comment. And Daniel, looking at that fight, don't forget this is the main event. So there was 11 fights on the card, 10 other fights had happened, and Daniel made an observation that he shared with the audience as the announcer, and he said, if you look at the decisions that have happened tonight, these judges have favored position. That's true. I saw what Daniel saw, and so did you guys. I just don't know that it was limited to that night. I don't think that we had some special group of judges that happened to look at top control. I can date that thing back the first time they set that cage up in 1993. Position has always mattered. And I have heard a number of people argue about the decision. I wasn't one of those people, and admittedly, I'm not great at judging fights. But I do understand the criteria. I do understand that the first criteria is damage. And whenever these fights get done, there's always a stat that comes up. I call it CompuBox. That's not what it's called. I think it's called Fight Stats. CompuBox is a boxing term, and maybe even more selective. It's a boxing term used by Showtime or HBO. I'm going to use the vernacular. They show the CompuBox, and they want to talk about effective strikes with fists, effective kicks, takedown discrepancies, submission attempts. It's one of these things. And if you look at those numbers, they look a little bit better for Sandhagen. But that is a narrative created by somebody else other than the Nevada State Athletic Commission, who sanctioned this, who follows the unified rules, who has stated a criteria number 1 as damage. And an example that I know you'll be able to relate to, and one that you'll be able to remember, but it's Mike Tyson. I don't know that Mike ever had a fight where he touched that guy more times than he got touched. But boy, did he do it hard. When he stuck, that's where the damage comes in. That's a subjective term. It's a big difference in the pros and in the amateurs. In the amateurs, it is point fighting. It is who touched who more. With what part of your glove, right? The Olympics are going on. You guys watching? What part of your glove touches what part of his body? Boom, you get a point. And the judges are all trying to keep track, and they're trying to count, and they're trying to write down the tally while they're watching the action. It's why it never works. But either way, it's a difference between the amateurs and the pros. And Taekwondo isn't any different. Although I watched fencing We're talking unarmed combat. I watched armed combat yesterday, fencing, but it was still, you get points for contact as opposed to damage. Now, that's a subjective term, and I'm not forcing down your throat that TJ did more damage. I'm reminding you that that's what the judges looked for in conjunction with top position. I thought it was the right call. I thought it was an awesome fight. And that's why I said that a moment ago about Sandhagen. Look, there was two guys that caused an awesome fight. You guys want to know something interesting? To compliment Sandhagen, you guys know Ricky Simone, right? My teammate. Ricky Simone's ranked number 7 in the world, and that's a little bit low, quite frankly. Rob Font, I believe, is number 2. Ricky beat Rob. He lost a decision. Ricky beat Rob. Ricky's one of the top guys out there. I just happened to see him. I saw him on Sunday after the fight. So, by the way, Ricky, who should Sandhagen fight next? Not TJ. I think we all know TJ's the number 1 contender. Who should Sandhagen fight next? Now, this was a prime opportunity for Ricky to say to me, for me to then go out and tell all of you guys, I got inside scoop, and Ricky Simone just challenged Corey Sandhagen. That's not what he said. Listen to what Ricky said. And I bring you Ricky because he matters. Ricky has the right to an opinion. He's one of the top guys in the sport, let alone that division. He said, I think that Sandhagen should fight Rob Font. I said, how do you get to that math? Historically speaking, if you lost your last match, you fight another guy who lost his last match. It's not an absolute, but boy, it's close. You're in the 95 percentile range. That's the way it's done. Winner versus winner. Loss versus a loss. And Ricky said, Sandhagen could have won that fight. It was razor thin. I'm changing the words, but this is what Ricky said. Sandhagen could have won that fight. Many people think he did. If TJ wins that fight and gets to become the number 1 contender, Sandhagen doesn't fall. Oh, and by the way, if TJ gets in there with the winner of Aljo and Jan, in the meanwhile, you're going to need a number 1 contenders fight. I think that Sandhagen is 1 win away, if it's over Rob Font, from being right back into a championship. Major compliment to Sandhagen from a fellow guy in the division. And not to mention, Ricky is also giving a nod to Rob Font's hard work. I'm sitting here telling you that Ricky beat Rob. Rob won the decision. It's not Ricky's words. Ricky was cool with the way it went. Fair's fair. They raised his hand. Some are tight, goes both ways. It was an awesome match, though. And if you look at that cut, right, that was very deep. I spoke with TJ's coach this morning, Daryl Christian. If you guys will recall on this fight, Sandhagen Dillashaw, if you'll recall, that was supposed to happen 6 weeks ago. Now, it got postponed because TJ took a cut. And while I'm not a doctor, but I love to play one on YouTube, when you have a cut and it heals, that's now called scar tissue. Scar tissue is not as strong, not as tough as skin. So if you get scar tissue and you get re-cracked in that same spot, you're likely to break open and start bleeding. At least more likely than if you hadn't had that cut in the first place. So I just asked the coach, I just asked Daryl Christian, hey, by the way, I read that fight was canceled because of a cut. Is the place where TJ was bleeding in the ring, was that the same spot? He goes, the exact same spot. And he said, and by the way, if you ever rub your hand over TJ's head, he's got a bone right there. He said, in fact, doctors have suggested that they go in and shave that bone down a little bit because it's always going to break open. There is no relevance to any part of that as it pertains to the fight. I got inside scoop on a guy's cut. I thought I would share it with you. That's all that is. I said, by the way, let me tell the audience, how many stitches did it take to close? Daryl said, man, I don't know, but it was about 20. Okay. Store that away. Stay focused on TJ, because while this was never said to be a number 1 contenders bout, we said it, right? We all agreed as the audience, boy, this should be. I mean, whoever wins this fight should be the number 1 contender. I believe it's going to play out that way. And in one hand, that's a little bit disappointing because I believe all roads to TJ Dillashaw should lead you right into Uriah Faber's driveway. Don't think I'm going to get that, but I do think that TJ should get that title shot. So, okay, one small caveat, which is TJ's knee was bothering him. Now, that's a quote. His knee was bothering him. MCL, they won't know the level of extent until they have an MRI. They are hoping, of course, that it's not torn. Now, an MCL injury historically is much better than an ACL injury. However, recovery time is very similar, which could kick the can 6-7 months. At this spot in TJ's career, where he's been removed from the ring 2.5 years, 3 years since a victory, it's one of those things where there's no time to spare. Not to mention, if Dillashaw won, just numbers might help you guys to quantify this. If TJ reclaims the championship, he will be the oldest champion ever south of 170 pounds. Fun stat. Just sharing it with you that time is of the essence. So as much as we're congratulating both guys, quite frankly, Sandhagen looked awesome. TJ Dillashaw looked awesome. TJ was a little grittier in the way he closed out rounds, which is rare for a guy coming off a layoff. Ring rust. One piece of ring rust is not just timing, it's conditioning. TJ knew when to win. He knew when to get on top, when and where to control. Major credit. He gets major credit for that. Where does it go from here, and how long are we going to continue to judge Dillashaw? I must tell you, every time I've seen TJ's name, it always says he's coming off an EPO bust. Now, that is very specific vernacular that coat of paint has never been put on anybody before. Everybody gets put into the same category, which is PED, which is an USADA violation. It's one of those two terms. People are continuing to state specifically what the substance was. I don't understand that. I don't know why they're doing that. And either way, this is from a guy that played on that side of the tracks. Before you think you got to tell me, and this is why I'm coming to his defense. Look, either way, it's very unique to the way TJ's being treated. So let's stop doing that. People are talking about the return of John Jones. They're not talking about the return of John Jones, who's failed more drug tests than anybody. They're talking about Anderson Silva versus Logan Paul. They're not talking about Anderson Silva, who failed 3 drug tests and is now taking on Logan Paul. I'm just saying, in the world of fairness, you want to kick a guy, go ahead and kick him, but we got to kick them all the same. TJ Dillashaw served his time. TJ Dillashaw is the number 1 contender. If that pains you, good. If you're happy with it, great.